Well, hey, everybody. My name is Eric Waldrop with Your Next Step Leadership Coaching, and I'm so glad that you joined me today because I feel like you're going to be in for a treat for somebody that we get to hear from today. And I want to introduce to you my friend Katina Boyd. Katina, thanks for being with me today.
You are more than welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And y'all, the conversation that I wanted to have with Katina today, because I feel like she is so able to speak into this space, is we really wanted to talk about, and I wanted to just find out from her, um, considering all of the racial tension that our culture feels right now. I just wanted to boot up a conversation with her about what we can learn from her and her experiences that she's having right now. And Katina, one of the things that I feel like you have the ability to speak into in this tension that we feel is the fact that, number one, you're a Christian. Obviously, you're Black,
Yes.
and number three, you have a husband who's a police officer.
Yes.
And so you feel this in lots of different ways that a lot of people don't. So I'm just looking forward to you speaking some wisdom into this. And thanks for being here.
You are more than welcome.
Yeah. All right. So before we dive into some questions, tell everybody a little bit about you and your family and what you do and such.
Okay. Well, my name is Katina Boyd. I am a clinical pharmacist. I am in a unique position where I work for care management for a local health facility. And I am married to a police officer. He has been a police officer for 17 years. And we are newly married. We actually are a blended family. This is our second time around. Our last time, as we both say, like, this is it.
I love it.
This is it.
This is it.
This is it. We're doing it this time. So we've been married 3 years, my husband and I, and we have 3 children. I have a bonus baby. That's what I call Braxton. He's
I
20.
love it.
And I have 2 biological daughters who are 18 and 16, one of which is leaving me to go to college in
That's
about
awesome.
3 weeks.
Golly.
So we have a lot going on. Jeff and I are adventure people. Well, he's an adventure person, and he is pulling me along.
Really?
He is an adventure person. And all of we do a lot of camping, and all of my friends are like, we cannot believe that you are
That
camping.
you're doing this.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I'm doing it. I still am not a bug person, so
Yeah.
Jeff to come and slay the dragon for me quite a bit.
So what have you learned about yourself while you're camping?
I have learned that I am not patient when things go wrong, because one of the things about camping is that something always goes wrong. There is no such thing. I don't care how much preparation you
Yeah.
do. There is no such thing as something not going wrong. Now,
Yeah.
you can always, preparation helps you for it not to be a catastrophe, but you have to allow the process. So you cannot be in a rush camping,
Mhm.
because when you rush, then you make a mistake. You skip a step in terms of your setup or your breakdown. We check our tire pressure every single time. And if you're in a rush, it's little things that you would just skip. So camping has taught me to slow down just a
Mm.
little and make sure that you got the little details taken care of.
That's profound. I love that. Slow down. You're right. When you get in a hurry, you forget stuff and you take it for granted, and that's when you get bit, right? Okay, so obviously, well, what a lot of you may not know that are listening to this, Katina, we've gone to the same church for years together. You have recently moved into my neighborhood, so hello, neighbor. It's good to have you here. Um, but considering the current racial tension that we all feel, um, but also knowing you're a Christian and knowing that having a personal relationship with Christ is important to you. What has God been teaching you in the midst of a lot of things that have been happening lately?
God has been really teaching me that I need to seek Him.
Mm.
because if I seek the news or if I seek social media or even if I seek conversations with other people, I tend to leave those a little jaded. And one of the things that God is teaching me is that He always has a plot twist. So even though when things look like they're going a certain way, we don't know all what He knows. So He's training me to look to Him instead of what's going on in terms of to look for what He's doing. Because I love it when He says that I'm doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it? So He's doing it. I think I always have to be very cognizant of making sure that I'm in a place where I can perceive.
Yeah, I like that. What does it mean to you to seek God?
For me, it means spending time with God.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things that as we've had a pandemic and then we have all this social injustice, and then you're working from home and
Yeah.
everybody's schedules, I think for me, it put me in a place of being very distracted.
Wow.
So it was more difficult to seek God because I had so many things to do and it was easy to be like, oh, I'll just put that off. I'll just put that off. And so in the past, I've always labeled it like a quiet time. You read and then you write it out. And God is teaching me just to sit with Him. So over the past couple of weeks, I've just been journaling, not anything in particular, but just really sitting down and being expectant to hear that God is going to give me some directions on things.
Mm.
And He did.
What do
He
you feel like God is? Yeah. What do you feel like God has said to you while you're journaling?
Well, before I started really getting back into my journaling, my eating was all over the place because my nerves were all over the place, right? I'm trying to manage. We've got some home improvements going on right now. I said we got a pandemic. I'm in the healthcare profession. I'm listening to this. I've got teenagers, a lot of stuff going on, and a husband who's a police officer, who is not everybody's best friend right now,
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And I just found myself running around just eating. I'm at the computer. And so one of the things that God spoke to me about was about cleaning up my diet just a little bit,
Wow.
to really just get to a place where I could not be so dependent on my carbs. Not that carbs are bad, because your girl likes her chips and fries.
You're right. Yeah.
Let me just make it clear.
That's right.
Just making it clear. I'm not making it clear. But I did take a moment just to really eat more fruits and vegetables, go back to my self-care, get my rest, drink some water. And then in my journaling, God was really calling me to rest. I really felt like I needed to be, I don't know, coming out of this new and improved and,
Yeah.
creating something. And He was like, no, you're doing just what you're supposed to be doing. You're being.
That's so good. What does rest mean to you?
It doesn't always mean sleeping.
Isn't that true?
It doesn't always mean sleeping. I think for me, rest meant calming my mind. And journaling was really good for me to do that because when you physically write, even though your mind is rolling, after a minute, you got to catch up to yourself so that you can write.
Yeah.
And I think it's resting has been through journaling, through taking a step back and just kind of looking at things before flying off into action. So rest for me has been sitting quietly, which is hard for my personality. I don't sit well. I don't
Mm.
even watch TV well. If the writing isn't good, I'm like, ugh. It bothers my husband. He's like, you can't just sit here. And I'm like, no. I mean, like, I'm gonna get 30 minutes back. No, I already know it's happening. So
I love it.
been not doing. Resting has been not doing and being okay with sitting.
Yeah. What kind of clarity do you feel like that's given you during all this?
I think, interestingly enough, some of the things that I had planned to do, like, oh, I'm gonna rev up this. I also teach a fitness class, and so I was like, I'm gonna rev up, and I'm gonna do more of this because, of course, like more is what you're supposed to do. And I think at the end of this, it was just sort of like, no, I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing. There are some things I'd like to expand. maybe not even with that, and that's okay too. I
Yeah.
think it's the clarity has given me a place to be like, I don't have to know all the answers, because guess what? I didn't really know them. I thought
Mm.
I did. And some of my frustration, even at home, is that, if everybody would do it my way, because my way is the best way, and I know everything, then everything would be great. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't have to get so frustrated with everybody. And, God is showing me, and I think that's one interesting thing about what we're going to talk about today is you don't know everything.
Yeah.
And there are several different perspectives. And sometimes you have to lay what your perspective is down for a minute just to see somebody else's. That's been big for me in marriage. It's been big for me in terms of parenting children who are older, who are no longer children. Now they're
Mm.
young adults who can make decisions, but are still financially my responsibility.
Right. I know that world too.
Yeah, so that's a total different place
Yeah.
to be than where I've been in the past,
Yeah.
where like, well, I pay the cost to be the boss here, so no. And
Yeah.
it's sort of like, well, yeah, I still pay the cost to be the boss, but I am not in charge of you. You're in charge of you.
What's helped you see things from other people's perspective during this time?
I would have to say going through a divorce helped me see things from other people's perspective.
Mm.
I was always one of these people that saw things as very black and white. It's this way, it's right or wrong, it's this or that. And one of the things that divorce taught me is that no, sometimes it's just a mess. Sometimes, especially when you're talking about relationships, especially when you're talking about people's feelings, especially when you're talking about trauma and when you're talking about hurt, I think Lisa Turkhurst described it the best. She said it's like nailing jello to the wall.
Mm.
And so when you go through something like that, or people who've been through, I don't know, addictions, other things, and they've come back from that, I think one of the things that you discover is that it's not as easy as you first thought it might be.
Hmm.
One example I would give is I remember when there would be single moms and there would be they would be with some horrible guy. And I'm like, I would never do that. I don't understand. How in the world would you pull somebody over your children? And though thankfully I never did that, but I do understand the loneliness that can drive you to a place where you're not making the best decisions. And that doesn't mean that you don't care about your children.
Yeah.
But in the past, I may have been one of those people who made that snap decision that, oh, well, she doesn't care about her kids. No, she's a human being who's in a bad place and made a bad decision, which we all do if we're honest.
That
So,
is so
I
true.
yeah, divorce really helped me gain some perspective. And I think with Jeff and I both being divorced, it's so funny. We handle things differently. He is the only person that could say to me, man up. You know, he did. I mean, he had been divorced
Yeah.
as well. But, I was having a difficult time with some things. And some things he would be like, yeah. And then some things he'd be like, Tina, man up.
Wow.
And, but coming from him and what he had been through, I was able to take it. So there you go.
That,
I think definitely divorce.
that's so good. You know what's interesting, I find in my own life too, is that when I was much younger, things felt more black and white. For me, things, you kind of knew this was right, this was wrong, and things seemed to be very clear in my mind of how I stood on lots of things. And as I've gotten older, I've recognized there's a whole lot more gray in the world, and we have to manage more gray than we ever have, right?
Yes. And that's been one of the things that has been a teaching moment for me with my kids. Because again, they're young, so they see things as one way. And I
Hmm.
have to say to them, no, it's not all this.
Right.
It's some of this, but it's a whole lot of stuff that you don't know anything about as well.
That's so good. Speaking of teaching your kids and just how all the current cultural things are affecting your children, how has that principle that Black Lives Matter, How has that resonated in your family?
Well, one thing is we've always, even Jeff and I both as parents, singular and then together, we've always celebrated who we are. I mean, who God created us to be. God created our whole family, a Black family. That's the way He all made us. And so we've always celebrated, who we are. So to say that Black Lives Matter, well, of course they do. I mean, like that's
Hmm.
kind of the way, we never, until the term came up, we never really talked about it like.
Right.
However, when the term did come up, and it's been out for more than just now, a lot of people are thinking this is a this year conversation. It is so not. But
Wow, that's important distinction.
yeah, I think, people, a lot of, if it's not your story, sometimes you don't always get it right when it first happens. And so I think a lot of people feel like, oh, Black Lives Matter just happened. And it's like, no, it really happened more than 5 years ago is when the first terminology kind of came into place. But when I think about Black Lives Matter and what it means to our family, we've talked about that, and especially with my husband. And he has, of course, we Black Lives Matter, and of course, we feel like police lives matter. Of course they do, because
Yeah.
I'm married to a police officer.
Yeah.
We have had to have that conversation. Well, what does that look like and what does that mean? And especially for him as an African American police officer, even for him to say, I know if I go into a store and I'm not dressed as a police officer and I'm dressed in a hoodie, or I've got on, depending on what I'm wearing or how I'm looking at the time, I may not have gained that same respect from people that I do when I come in as a police officer with the badge and the belt. So we've had that conversation to say, yes, Black Lives Matter. Of course they do. We're a Black family. We feel like Black Lives Matter. What does that mean in terms of police brutality, which we've had lots of conversations with Jeff? That's, again, not something that's new. Police brutality has been going on for a long time. And I think we're just hearing about it because everyone has a phone now.
Mm.
Everyone has a way to video. So one of the things that I've been really talking to the girls about is to temper how you feel with what you display and how you act. Because if what you want is change, and if what you want is for people to see you, although when you're upset, you should be able to do whatever you want. And I understand that. So I'm totally not saying I
Right.
don't agree with what, how upset that people are. I do feel like that if we're going to elicit change, we have to be able to come to the table and have a conversation, and me be able to listen to you and you be able to listen to me, is what
Mm.
I kind of
That's
said,
good.
instead of just barking at people what you want them to know. Express yourself and then allow them to ask you a question, or allow them to express themselves, and you just kind of bite the lip,
Yeah.
retaliating back at them.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing that Black Lives Matter has meant in our home is to say, what's our response? Because we
Mm.
were already there. We already knew Black Lives Matter.
Right.
We already had conversations with our children about, when you encounter the police and what you need to do. And, honestly, did we have to say some things different to them than probably some white families? Probably. And Jeff would even attest to that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that was the reality. And so we trained them that way. Hey, cooperate. Something happens, we'll deal with it. And
Mm.
at least we're at the place in our
Yeah.
society where you can do that.
Right.
Mom grew up in a time where something happened and it just happened.
Right.
And there was no one to go to. So at least it's better.
Yeah.
So we've had the whole Black Lives Matter piece for us has been, what is going to be your response?
Mm. So when you ask them that and y'all talk about that as a family, what's been the answer to that?
Well, funny that you would ask. Um, for, for my girls, I mean, they were very angry at first.
Yeah.
Um, uh, you know, they didn't understand, and they were very angry, and they wanted everyone to have the same response that they were having.
Mm.
And I think, um, that's unrealistic, but
Yeah.
that's, they're young. That's what they wanted, and so they wanted to participate in marches, and um, they wanted to get out and have their word heard.
Yeah.
They wanted to be heard. I think in all of it, that's what I heard the most, is they wanted to be heard.
Yeah.
Um, my husband, on the other hand, although he was not against protesting, he wasn't against peaceful protest. I remember him saying the Monday after a lot of the most recent riots broke out, I hope nobody bothered my car overnight.
Mm.
And I was like, who bothers a police car? But so that was what he said. And then that day, I mean, he's in community engagement. So I often call him officer friendly. He usually wears polos, khakis. He's in the community. He's
Right.
talking to kids. He's eating lunch with children. But that day he was back in regular uniform, and it's putting on he's got the rifle, and he's got the bulletproof vest. And I'm like, can you call in?
Yeah.
He's like, no, I gotta go. So it was like that first day when he was kind of going back in, and we didn't know what he was walking back into because of what we saw on TV and what kind of people were reporting. I was all over the place. I was like, Lord, keep my children. They're angry over here. They want to go to a protest.
Yeah.
Don't go. They're home and sing Kumbaya. I was like, you quit being a police officer today.
Right.
You just don't ever go out for the next 5 years, and we'll
Right.
just live here. I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's where we've been.
Gosh. You said something interesting a minute ago that you said, I don't know how you specifically said it, but this is what I heard, that you wish there was less shouting and more listening.
Yes. And I think I see that not in person, because of course most people that know me, they know, okay, well, she's married to a police officer. They're not going to say too much.
Yeah.
But I do see a lot on social media that I have to just get off of it, because it just puts you in a place on both sides. It's just like, oh, could everybody just listen? Yes. So I wish that there was less shouting, and especially as people of faith. As people of faith, we should not be participating in shouting on either side. Because I feel like when people shout, they feel like that they are speaking for God. If I'm a Christian and I'm shouting and I feel like that what I'm saying is right, then I feel like I'm on the side of right. And I feel like that I don't know that we necessarily know how Jesus would be about every single solitary thing.
Right.
And often he has taught us that he's usually not exactly like what we would think.
Yeah.
And so I really do wish that there would be less shouting, but especially as people of faith, we've got to be the non-shouters.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's such a great point. Okay, so I want to ask you some pointed questions on this issue. So really just following that theme of just people need to listen more. What do you want white people to hear?
I think one of the things that I would like for white people to hear is that every conversation about race is not divisive. Because I feel like people feel like if race comes up, then you are trying to be divisive. And I think people just want to stop hearing about it. And if I don't hear about it, then we're all together, or we're whatever, this fake whatever. So I feel like that they feel like if you talk about race, that is divisive. And I feel like that's not necessarily always true. You can talk about race. You can talk about injustices that happen and have a realization and an eye-opening, because I think it is eye-opening for a lot of people. If you didn't experience it, if you didn't personally see it or partake into it, it is a difficult concept to buy into, really. And I get that. It's difficult. I mean, it's like if somebody tells you the sky is purple and you've never seen a purple sky. Nobody you know has seen a purple sky. I mean, it's like, no, I'm looking at it, it's blue. And then, but these people are telling you, yes, it really is. I got pictures to prove that it was purple, that this happened to me. I have a video, whatever. So I think the first thing is that every conversation about race is not divisive. I think the second thing is that most of the conversations about race are not personal. And I think people take it personal. If you talk
Yeah.
about slavery, they're like, well, I didn't own slaves. That's not the point. The
Yeah.
point here is that we do have to recognize and I won't even say admit, but I would say recognize and validate that things have occurred so that you can move on for the future. Because I
Mm.
think there's a lot of deflecting and I didn't have anything to do with it, but that doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
Hmm.
Right? So I think
Yeah.
first of all, saying every conversation about race is not divisive. It's just a conversation about race. As if it were a conversation about a recipe. It's a
Yeah.
conversation. So that's one. Two is that most of the time it's not personal because racism is in systems.
Mm.
There's still, they did a little video about it on the news I was watching in Charlotte, and probably in every city in America, but there's this thing called redlining.
Mm.
Redlining was a practice put into place in the housing system so that white families had to stay over here and black families were not allowed to live where they drew a red line. Now, there are several communities in Charlotte that had restrictive covenants, especially I think in the Myers Park neighborhood.
Yeah.
Those neighborhoods are so old that those restrictive covenants were written 50 years ago. And the restrictive covenants, if you look them up to this day, say that all of the residents have to be white.
Wow.
That is systemic racism.
Hmm.
That is not one person. Now, somebody wrote it at some
Yeah.
point, but that is systemic. That's in the housing system. That's where the system is set up
Hmm.
to pull people apart, to set up to say, okay, well, you can't live over here based on the color of your skin. Now, there's been legislation that makes redlining not, it's against the law at this
Yeah.
point. But the fact is, it was there and it
That's a
set
yeah.
up how communities are to this day. Most communities are still, I mean, you're getting to the place where it's getting better, but even think about growing up, most communities were very separated in terms of where people lived.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
in the system.
You're right, and I'm so glad that you brought that information to light because speaking from somebody who is white, um, I can't speak for all white people, but I will tell you that there is some concern and some trepidation to broach this topic because of for fear of not saying the wrong thing, or excuse me,
Right.
not saying the right thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and the fact that it could be it could feel extremely personal and hurtful toward
yeah,
others.
yeah.
And so I'm glad you said that, these things need to be discussed because it's not always a personal conversation. It's a systemic type of conversation that needs to be discussed.
It is. Now, that's not to say, again, there are racist people. There are people who,
Right.
what I'm saying is the vast majority of people who want to have a conversation, most of those people are not going to want to have a conversation.
Right.
Flat out. You will
That's
know.
true.
They're not going to want to have a conversation. But people who want to have a conversation, I think that would be my first thing is to say, don't take it personal.
Mm,
That would be the first. That's the way, because it feels personal. I
it
know
does.
it has to feel personal, but you have to get to a place to separate yourself enough to hear so that changes can occur.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. Great. So it's not every conversation about race is divisive,
Right?
and it's not necessarily personal.
It's not.
It addresses a system. I
Yes.
love that. Okay, so what do you want Black people to hear?
The same thing, really. I
Yeah.
think too, to say if someone wants to have a conversation, one of the things that I always try to offer people, and sometimes it's difficult, is grace.
Mm,
If somebody asks me a question or if we're in a conversation, I always have an opportunity to provide education or I can snap back. It's always a choice.
wow, that's
And
good.
so I've had so many opportunities on the job because how many pharmacists have you seen that look like me?
Wow.
Not that many.
Yeah.
So I've had, and this is actually a conversation I had with my daughter. when she wanted to be very angry, and she was mad at me, really, like, why aren't you more, angry? And I felt the same way. I'm concerned. Don't get me wrong. I'm absolutely concerned. Now I have an African American son, I have an African American husband who is a police officer. I've got you wanting to go to a march. I am concerned. Okay. I got concerned. I got concerned down pat, babe. Don't talk to
Yes.
me about
Yes.
concern. So she was like challenging me, like, why aren't you more concerned?
Yeah.
And I would say to her is that I am concerned.
Yeah.
And I prayed really to God, like, hey, what is it that you want? How do you want me to use my voice? And you're not the first person that has come up to me and asked me. And I was like, okay, God, well, here it is. I'm using my voice. So what I would say to Black people is, if somebody wants to have a conversation, or even if they ask you a question and the question has some microaggression in it, and I'm not saying I'm not negating any of that. I'm saying, as a person of faith, attempt to offer grace and offer a response. And I will give you an example. Somebody talked about the NFL using the Black national anthem. It was on a Facebook post, and they were very upset about it. Oh, forget the NFL. I'm not watching it, blah, 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 blah. And then one of my friends on Facebook posted, Black national anthem, what is that? When would that ever come into play? And then somebody responded, well, Antifa or somebody else just created it. This is some mess they just created. And which is incorrect. And so I responded. I said, okay, let me just drop a little knowledge here. And my response was, well, actually, the Black National Anthem was written, I think it was like 18 something. It was 1869. I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it was written as a poem to President Abraham Lincoln for his birthday. And it was written for him because
Wow.
he was part of the abolition of slavery. And it was actually a poem written about freedom for Black people. That is the way it got started.
Wow.
It actually set to music.
That's new information to me. I had no idea about that.
It was actually set to music, I think, in like 1915 or thereabout. And then the NAACP dubbed it the Black National Anthem. So I'm not talking about Antifa, but so they don't get credit for that. It was written a very long time ago. And I said, so here again, let's not give the media or the powers that be the opportunity to win at this.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, that's so good.
I'm like, let's not give them the opportunity to win at this. Do you think that this was a coincidence that they would announce this the week of the 4th of July? I'm sorry, but we're not going to be playing football for a while. So why would you announce that, unless, because we all know with media or with social media, period, negative attention or positive attention is what? Attention. It's clicks,
That's right.
It's ratings, it's whatever. It's people who didn't even care about the NFL. Now they're clicking on it because they want to know, are you going to play this song? And it's, and so I was like, we really have to take a step back and not take the bait to be angry. And it's interesting, yeah. Nobody else commented after my because I put that. That was what I was like, here's the truth. No. This is what happened. This is what it is. But I want to ask this question. Does anybody think this is a coincidence?
Yeah. Gosh, you just dropped something so profound. How do we not take the bait?
And that's another thing that I would say to both Black and white people. Just, I think lowering how much we take in, because there's bait every day. There is bait literally every day. And I think too, fact checking things. I think that's really important, because I think a lot of things get put out and they're not, the full truth is not there, because I don't know if anybody knows this, and I'm not anti-media, but it doesn't seem as though the point here is to portray what really happened or the truth. Often the point is to portray a narrative that will get people to look and read.
Yeah.
We all know who reads an article that just says, well, the cat went down the hill. We don't care.
Yeah.
But a huge cat fell down the hill. I mean, we need the drama of it is what's needed for people to participate and watch it. And so I'm not saying everything is wrong, but I think we do have to, before you respond, fact check it. Just do a little fact checking.
Don't just assume that if it scrolls past on your television that it's true.
Correct. Or if it scrolls on social media, that it's correct. However, my friends and I have a joke. So it's always like, well, let me find out. Let me ask the book. Because, Facebook tells everyone.
The book.
Together, when the wedding is, when the funeral is, you always check Facebook. Yeah. So there is some truth to the book, but please don't take it as your gospel to respond, because when you do, it leaves you in a bad place. Yeah. You're not happy. You're not in a good place when you take the bait and then you get into this big discussion with someone and neither of you are the better afterward.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to what we even started our conversation with, is it just destroys your ability to have any type of mental peace whatsoever. Right. Because you're just ruminating on this negativity, and that changes your focus, that changes your attitude, changes everything, right?
It changes everything. And that's sort of been my mantra every time I respond to somebody. Some things I'm just like, I'm going to respond. And I have to take a minute. Sometimes I'm like, okay. Yeah. So I take it as an opportunity to sometimes provide a little education, like, no, this is da-da-da-da. But, and I've done that the other way as well. And I've said, even to my kids, I'm like, guys, you've got to offer a little bit of grace. You're asking for somebody else to see it like you, and they're not you. They haven't had your experiences. So if they haven't had your experiences, they're not you. They haven't walked a mile in your moccasins. They don't know. So I'm not saying ignorance is bliss and you get you pass because you don't know. However, I think that's where that grace comes in. If someone does not have your experience, you need to offer a little bit of grace.
I think that's so wise. I love the word grace, because within that, what I also hear you saying is sometimes it's just good to be empathetic in those moments, to recognize, like you said, not everybody's had your experience. They don't see the world the way you do. They don't come from the context that you do.
Right.
So that's why we need to give each other a little grace, so that we can even have these conversations together, even if we don't even know what the terms mean yet, right?
Right. And I think, people want huge changes, and which changes are happening. They really are. But I think change really happens conversation at a time. And I think when you're able to have a conversation and when you're able to be more cognizant of things, then it helps you get to a place where you can make space for something else or somebody who doesn't look like you. Not that you're going to offer any special, nobody's asking for special treatment or anything, but often when your eyes are open, then you can be like, I may be missing out on something both ways. And I feel like one of the things, I have tons of friends of all races. And one of the things I think about is that how boring would my life be if I didn't have Laura, who makes the best empanadas ever. Jackie from Kentucky, cutest little white lady, she always throws her little towel over her shoulder, cooking me that's a good cook right there, cooking me some of that Kentucky
there you go.
And just, all of my friends, that we all come from different places and do different things. And I'm thinking, like, how boring if everybody looked like me.
That's so good.
To look at it is that we may be missing out on having this homogenous life where, everybody thinks like me, everybody looks like me, we're all the same.
Yes.
And people often want everyone, our country is so great. And I think I agree with them. And one of the things about our country that's so great is that we are different.
Yeah.
and you can be different in America and come together. And I think all of the differences make us better. We just have
Mhm.
got to get to a place where we can stop fighting about the differences and just embrace the differences and say, okay, well, how do we move on for everybody?
Yeah. Well, and if you're a leader and you're listening to this and you're trying to figure out, hey, what next steps do you need to take in your organization to be able to lead through this? Katina, what I heard you say is it's one conversation at a time,
Mm-hmm.
and it's extending grace toward one another,
Yeah.
recognizing, we all come from different places, but there's power in that variety.
Yes, there's power in the variety. And I think as in leadership to celebrate the variety
Mm,
versus pushing either. And I would say most people that lead are probably not pushing for everybody to be the same. Yet at the same time, they probably are not celebrating differences or saying, I'm standing in solidarity with you. We're going to make sure that our environment, our culture here is a culture that's inclusive and that kind of thing. I think as a leader, that's where we need to be moving towards, is that a place of embracing the differences of the people who work for us or who work
mm,
with us. And I think when you embrace people and you can allow them through a conversation, or I don't know, through a program, if you set something up where people can come in and talk about these things, that they can be heard. I think when people feel heard and when they feel accepted and part of the team, those people will do some great work for you.
mm. That's so good. Well,
They
you have
will
dropped,
be loyal.
yeah, you dropped a lot of wisdom on us. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation and speaking into this. I'm going to give you the floor. Is there anything else resonating with you before we close that you would just say to speak to a leader out there who's listening to
I am going to piggyback off of something that Dr. Tony Evans said, that when he said it, I was like,
this?
and he was talking to his African American grandchildren, talking to them about his own experiences. And he said that we must, in taking all of this that's going on right now, look at it as if we're driving a car. And when you drive, you have to be focused on your rearview mirror, yet cognizant, focused on your windshield, yet cognizant of your rearview mirror. And so he was saying we have to always recognize and accept and know the things that happened in our past and use that to make choices about what we're doing in our future. But our focus can't be in the past. Our focus has to be on the future. So
Mm,
it's on, when he said that, I was like, oh my gosh, as a family, I was like, that's it. We're focused on, yes, these things have happened and we will recognize them and we will talk about them and we're not going to sweep them under the rug. Yet we're going to take what happened and utilize that to say, okay, how do we need to mobilize for the future? And our focus is in the future. And I think when we talk about God doing a new thing and us being able to perceive that, it's in the windshield. It's in the windshield. So that's what I would say to people, definitely take the lessons of history. And if you don't know the history, find it out. If you don't know some of these things that people are talking about, find them out. They're out there,
fact
really
check it.
fact check it, right? Fact check it, and then use that to say, okay, so what do we do forward?
Well, I cannot say anything better than what you just said, because that was a wonderful way to just finish this time together. Thank you so much, Katina,
You're
for
welcome.
just being honest about your family, your experiences, because I feel like even some of the things you shared on here was new information for me. And so I go back to the things that you're saying about giving each other grace, that we don't often know that the places where we've come from. And so just using that opportunity to listen, to explain, and to give grace, I think those are wonderful words. Thank you so much for being here, Katina.
You're welcome.
All right, y'all. Hey, listen, thanks so much for watching. If this has been something that has fed your soul like it has mine, I pray that you will share this with a friend and join us next time. See you later.